Hello, everyone, and welcome to some of the stories we have for you right now. New video captures the terrifying moments of a plane crash in Toronto.
Something went wrong right at the last second.
Investigating what caused the commuter aircraft to land hard and flip over.
There was a giant firewall down the side. I could actually feel the heat.
How everyone survived, escaped, and how they're doing today.
We're going to bring both sides together. You have to talk to both sides.
Ukraine shut out of high-level negotiations to end the 3-year-old war.
He is Captain Canada. He's probably the best player to ever wear the Canadian jersey.
Plus, the pride of Nova Scotia as Canada prepares to take on the U.S. at the Four Nations Championship game.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
A joint investigation by Canadian and U.S. officials is underway into what caused that stunning crash of a commuter aircraft at Toronto's Pearson International Airport with 80 passengers and crew on board. All survived. We have details of the investigation, including new video of the crash landing. We'll hear harrowing tales from passengers who escaped that burning aircraft, the ensuing travel chaos right across the country, and the psychological effect on flying. Are you worried? Our coverage begins with CTV's Heather Wright at Canada's busiest airport.
Harrowing video shows the moment Delta Flight 4819 touches down at Toronto's Pearson Airport, providing new clues into the Monday crash.
The airplane seems to be descending very rapidly. The airplane banks slightly to the right, and then the right landing gear touches down, and I think that's where the right wing broke off.
As the plane skids along the runway, there's a burst of flames with black smoke billowing from the aircraft, which then flips onto its back and comes to a stop. All 76 passengers and 4 crew members aboard the plane managed to escape.
The crew of Delta Flight 4819 heroically led passengers to safety, evacuating a jet that had overturned on the runway on landing that was amidst smoke and fire.
A total of 21 people were taken to hospital, their injuries ranging from mild to critical. 19 have since been released. The plane was attempting to land during high winds and drifting snow, though it's not clear what role the weather played in the crash.
Whether they're mechanical with the airplane, whether it's wind, whether it's icing conditions on a runway, no idea at this point in time, so we'll let the TSB do their work. 20 investigators from the Transportation Safety Board of Canada are now at Pearson, along with a team from the U.S. FAA.
They're going to be mapping out the crash scene and getting all the pieces and parts. They'll be removing the 2 black boxes from the tail of the aircraft and be sent to be read.
As part of this investigation, what's left of the airplane will remain on the runway for the next 48 hours. Once it is removed, the runway will be inspected before it reopens for takeoffs and landings. Sandy.
Okay, Heather, thank you. And as Heather said, there were 76 passengers and 4 crew on board that Delta-operated plane when it crashed. Miraculously, no one was killed, but 21 were taken to hospital, several in critical condition. CTV's John Venevali-Rao spoke to some of them and is here to tell us how they're doing today. John.
Sandy, some of those passengers spent the day in hospital getting medically checked out and sharing stories of survival.
Everything, drop it!
In those frantic moments after that Delta flight flipped over on a runway, Peter Kukoff grabbed his phone and started filming. As he put it, they were initially hanging upside down like bats, dangling by their seatbelts.
They announced not to get out of their seats, so people were hanging there for, I can't remember how long, but just about a minute, and then they were like, okay, get down.
Kukoff says he didn't notice anything wrong on the flight until the moment they hit the ground.
Oh. And then all of a sudden, I just remember being fully sideways, and I was looking down and just seeing sparks and flames and whatever was grinding against the ground. And then, yeah, it happened pretty dang quick.
Passenger Ashley Zook also filmed herself overturned, later expressing disbelief at what happened.
I was just in a plane crash. Oh my God.
We're in Toronto. Well, the passenger who got these shots, now seen around the world, today reflecting on that moment of impact.
It was just incredibly fast. There was a giant firewall down the side. I could actually feel the heat through the glass. and then we were going sideways. I'm not even sure how many times we tumbled, but we ended upside down. I was hanging there in my seatbelt upside down.
Passengers helping each other get down.
We released the seatbelts that kind of fell to the floor, which is now the ceiling, and helped the lady next to me get out of her seatbelt.
Some of the passengers not from here have begun to make their way home. One injured man we spoke with who was released from hospital, his company sent a private jet to take him back to Minneapolis. Sandy.
Don't blame him. If you have the money, spend it. Okay, thanks, John. So, of course, it was travel chaos yesterday at the airport after the crash, with flights canceled or delayed, and the repercussions were felt right across the country. Let's bring in CTV's Beth McDonnell at Pearson. And Beth, I'm guessing that it is still not back to normal today, right?
Correct, Sandy. What's really happened here is a domino effect of delays. That's because last week the airport was hammered with more than 50 centimeters of snow from 2 storms, which canceled hundreds of flights. Then on Monday, which was supposed to be a recovery day, the crash happened and another 462 flights were canceled. And so there is a lot of catching up to do. We know because of the investigation, the runways, 2 runways will remain closed for another 2 days. Meanwhile, passengers, by and large, they are understanding given the safety issues and the complications with a crash like this, but they are anxious to get on their way.
Right. Okay. Now, Beth, talk to us about the fact that at the time of the accident, the airport shut down. Flights had to be diverted elsewhere, right? Flights that were coming into Canada. So what other airports across the country were affected?
Yeah, I'm sure we can all imagine it was chaotic, and safety was the top priority. So we know nearly a dozen flights were diverted to Ottawa. Many flights were also rerouted to Montreal and regional airports. Air Canada is saying today that given the weather events and this crash, it made for an extremely challenging situation across Eastern Canada. They're saying that they canceled nearly 1,300 flights in the past 6 days. Air Canada says service is removing, and they are adding flights and capacity where possible. Sandy?
Okay, good information. Thank you, Beth. Now, yesterday's crash adds to a series of aviation disasters in just the past few months, most recently that mid-air collision near Washington, D.C. We wanted to know, is there a common thread, and how do Canadians feel about flying? We asked CTV's Alex Carpet to look into these questions, and here's what he came up with. Alex.
Sandy, the Delta Airlines jet that flipped over in Toronto yesterday was North America's 4th major aviation accident. This set of unusual plane crashes may have some passengers worried about the safety of flying. In addition to yesterday's crash, an American Airlines jetliner and an Army helicopter collided near Washington's Reagan National Airport on January 29th, killing 67 people. A medical transportation plane crashed in Philadelphia 2 days later, which claimed the lives of 6 people. And on February 6th, 10 people were killed in a plane crash in Alaska.
I don't see any connection between these 4. It certainly something to look at.
No connection, but with the recent events, we asked passengers here how they feel about flying right now.
Of course, a little bit fear every time when I fly on a plane.
Now it's maybe safer because everyone will be more cautious and careful.
Experts say there can be a significant psychological impact to seeing so many incidents in such a short period of time.
Watching things like that are definitely very traumatizing, very frightening. I think, anytime we experience a sense of trauma, it reduces our sense of safety in the world.
Fatal and non-fatal commercial airline crashes are highly unlikely, especially here in Canada. A recent airline safety study published back in the summer found that between 2018 and 2022, the worldwide death risk per boarding was 1 in 13.7 million. Sandy?
Okay, CTV's Alex Carpa. Well, concern is growing over the health of Pope Francis. The Vatican says the 88-year-old is battling pneumonia in both lungs as he spends a 5th night in hospital. CTV's Genevieve Beauchemin is here now. And Jen, what more can you tell us about the health of the Pope?
Well, Sandy, it was late in the evening in Italy when the Vatican announced that his condition had worsened, and that worried many people. The pontiff's health has prompted concern among the faithful gathered outside the hospital. Doctors said he had the onset of pneumonia in both lungs.
I think it's a very difficult moment now for the Pope, but he's in good humor. He's praying, he's reading. That's what they tell us. But he's not receiving any visitors. The doctors have prohibited that, except his 2 secretaries. So we're in a very critical moment, I would think.
And the Vatican has canceled all papal audiences through the weekend, as well as a mass for deacons scheduled for Sunday.
Yeah, we hope he will get better soon and recover. Yeah, I don't know how is the situation, but yesterday we were reading in the newspaper that the situation is not so good.
On Monday, hospital staff determined he was suffering from a polymicrobial respiratory tract infection, a mix of virus and bacteria. Infectious diseases experts say the Pope's age, he's 88 years old, makes treatment trickier.
Polymicrobica.
We will see the effect of therapy within a few days, says Dr. Carmelo De Cero. This comes as Jubilee celebrations are underway for the Catholic Church, a year where millions are expected to make a pilgrimage to the Vatican. The Vatican said that the Pope wanted to thank his well-wishers around the world and asked them to pray for him. Sandy.
Jen, thank you for this. Israel is preparing for the return of the bodies of 4 hostages, including the youngest kidnapped by Hamas on October the 7th. Hamas says the remains of 32-year-old Shiri Bibas and her 2 young sons will be among those released on Thursday. 6 other living hostages will be freed on Saturday. In exchange, Israel is expected to release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. A new assessment shows that more than $50 billion will be needed to rebuild Gaza. Heavy machinery and equipment bound for Gaza are at the Rafah border crossing and part of Egypt's plan to reconstruct Gaza as an alternative to U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal to take over the Palestinian territory. And it's no secret that Donald Trump wants an end to the war in Ukraine. But at a groundbreaking meeting today between delegations from Washington and Moscow, one key participant was notably absent, not invited: Ukraine. Here's CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon.
Overnight, Russia launched dozens of drones into Ukraine, striking its capital. It will be 3 years next week since Russia invaded its neighbor, seizing territory and destroying thousands of lives. Top diplomats from Washington and Moscow met face to face in a Saudi Arabian palace, discussing ways to end this war.
There has to be concessions made by all sides. We're not going to predetermine what those are. We're certainly not going to negotiate this today.
Notably absent from these high-stakes talks, the Europeans and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. No one decides anything behind our back, says Zelensky, canceling his scheduled meeting with the Saudis, and in spite of assurances from Washington.
The facts will continue to push back on this notion that our allies haven't been consulted. They are being consulted literally almost on a daily basis.
For Vladimir Putin, this is already a win. Re-establishing diplomatic relations with Washington puts Russia back on the world stage. But already Russia is laying down markers, rejecting any European peacekeepers in Ukraine, calling that unacceptable. Washington and Moscow did agree to create teams to support Ukraine peace talks, restore staffing at U.S. and Russian embassies, and explore closer relations and economic opportunities.
No one else has been able to bring something together like what we saw today because Donald Trump is the only leader in the world that can.
Washington is convinced Russia is serious about negotiations to end the war. The big question now, when will President Donald Trump and Putin meet? Joy Malbon, CTV News, Washington.
And late this afternoon, Donald Trump was asked what he would say to Ukrainians who feel betrayed by the talks for a peace deal with Russia. And here's what he had to say.
I'm very disappointed. I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago.
The U.S. president also said he would not oppose the Europeans if they wanted to send peacekeeping troops to Ukraine to provide security in the event of a deal. Still ahead, winter is not over yet.
Just what it's like living here.
So it's not too cold for you?
I didn't say that.
From high winds to frigid temperatures, we'll let you know what to expect and how to prepare. Plus, the boys of summer warm up but fail to lock in a homegrown superstar. A small Alberta town is in shock after a 14-day-old baby was mauled by the family dog and later died. The RCMP says the boy was flown by air ambulance from Entwistle to the Children's Hospital in Edmonton.
Every time we've had to go to a situation where this is the case, it's quite difficult for everybody involved beyond just the parents and the family.
The dog, only being described as medium-sized, will be examined by a veterinarian, and an application for euthanization depends on the doctor's report. Montreal police have made a tragic discovery after 2 major snowstorms hit that city over several days. An unconscious 57-year-old man was found inside a snow-covered car with the engine still running. He was transported to hospital in critical condition but later declared dead. Police say the cause is unclear and the coroner's office is investigating. Well, more snow and cold in parts of Quebec and Ontario again today, with the prairies still in the grip of frigid temperatures. As for the Maritimes, high winds one day after a rather nasty winter storm. So it's a good time for us to reach out to CTV's Kaylin Mitchell for the big picture. Hi, Kaylin.
Thank you, Sandy. Well, let's begin with the situation in Atlantic Canada when it comes to those fierce winds that have been whipping across the region over the last couple of days. That is going to be an improving situation as we move through Tuesday evening, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. The winds are going to be diminishing, but at their peak, they had widespread gusts, 60 to 80 kilometers per hour, with some areas in excess of 80, 100 kilometers per hour. Now, one of the reasons why the winds got so strong is because that part of the country was squeezed in between that storm system and a broad area of high pressure that's been building across the prairie provinces. Now, that high pressure system is the one that has been driving some very cold polar sourced air down through the prairies and even over the Great Lakes area, triggering things such as extreme cold warnings and snow squalls for parts of southern Ontario. And there are still going to be some very cold temperatures around southern Ontario and southern Quebec as we move throughout much of this week. Not quite cold enough that we're going to see widespread extreme cold warnings, but during the nights, first thing in the morning, a lot of wind chills making it feel well down to the minus teens, minus 20s. There will be some improvement to those wind chills through the upcoming weekend. And of course, the bitter cold still in place across the prairies as well. Very cold start to the day tomorrow, especially in southern Saskatchewan, southern Manitoba. Some wind chills making it feel into the minus 40s. There'll be a gradual improvement in the wind chill values for those 2 provinces moving through the end of this week and into the upcoming weekend. Sandy.
So cold. Okay, Kaylin, thank you. Therefore, it may not feel quite like spring yet. Well, it isn't. We still have a time to go. But baseball season is around the corner, and celebrated Toronto Blue Jays slugger Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is set to become a free agent at the end of the season. The first baseman and the team failed to reach an agreement on an extension before today's deadline on contract negotiations. The 25-year-old insists he would like to stay on with the Blue Jays, but says the team didn't offer a dollar amount that made him want to take the deal. And speaking of dollar amounts, inflation ticked back up last month. After the break, what's driving prices for Canadian consumers? Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney has raised more funds than any other contender in the race to replace Justin Trudeau. The former central bank governor has brought in $1.9 million in donations, according to Elections Canada data. Chrystia Freeland, widely seen as Carney's main rival, has pulled in more than $226,000. Freeland's campaign is disputing that figure, claiming to have raised more than $600,000. Not in dispute is Canada's inflation rate, which has ticked back up to 1.9% in January, despite a national GST holiday. The tax break led to lower costs for consumers in some sectors, but Stats Can says the effects were offset by higher prices for gasoline and natural gas. If there had been no tax relief, the agency says inflation would have jumped much higher to 2.7%. And for a pretty penny, fans of British street artist Banksy and California rock band Blink-182 will soon have a chance to get their hands on a rather unique masterpiece. A Banksy painting called Crude Oil and owned by band member Mark Hoppus is going up for auction. Sotheby's says it will be sold in 2 weeks in London and is already expected to fetch more than $6 million US. CTV National News will be right back. His nickname used to be Sid the Kid, but at 37, Sidney Crosby is no longer a kid. In hockey years, in fact, he's an elder statesman. He's also the captain of Team Canada. Crosby and his teammates, including 2 fellow Nova Scotians, are 1 win away from capturing the championship of the Four Nations face-off. Let's go to CTV's Paul Hollingsworth in Crosby's hometown of Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia. Hi, Paul.
Sandy, this is the arena where Sidney Crosby grew up playing hockey. He achieved star status back when he was just a teenager. Now people in these parts are cheering for Crosby at this stage of his career to have another championship moment.
That was Crosby bouncing it in, and now it's going to be done. What a play by Sidney Crosby.
He is Captain Canada. He's probably the best player to ever wear the Canadian jersey.
Wearing Canada's jersey and serving as captain carries a lot of responsibility.
It's all the little moments that will create one big, huge moment.
That's what you need to win consistently, and we're going to need another great effort here in the next one.
Canada and the U.S. will battle Thursday in the championship game of the Four Nations face-off. Leading the way, 37-year-old Sidney Crosby, who is the top scorer in the tournament. Along with his fellow teammates, including Nova Scotians Nathan McKinnon and Brad Marchand, Crosby has helped to spark a national wave of enthusiasm for this team.
He's just so happy to be playing for Team Canada and putting that jersey on and playing with Nate and playing with Brad and, you know, doing our whole province proud.
Sidney Crosby.
He's carried himself as a true professional and a true athlete. He takes care of himself on and off the ice, and I challenge anybody in Canada to find anybody say anything bad about him.
It's difficult to put into words the level of affection and appreciation Nova Scotians have for Sidney Crosby. Safe to say people around here are cheering for Canada with a high level of national pride. They are cheering for the 3 Nova Scotians on this roster with provincial pride. And they are also cheering for Nova Scotia's most famous hockey export, Sidney Crosby, to have another golden moment. Sandy.
For sure. Thank you, Paul. And thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.